Welcome, Slumpbusters. I hope you all are having a fantabulous day. My name is Kyle Ledbetter, and I will be hosting this here fine conference championship preview because we have joining us here today Mo Murphy from the Off the Ball Network and a Miami Heat fan, along with the guy over there in whatever box he is in. Juju Talks Sports, Julia Martinez, the host of the Slumpbuster YouTube channel and avid Boston Celtics fan here. So we've got an Eastern Conference final for the second time in 3 years between the Miami Heat and the Boston Celtics. We could go all the way back to 4 times in 10 years or 4 times in 11 years between these two teams. It's been two of the premier basketball franchises in the Eastern Conference going back, well, I guess you could say to my lifetime, but still the Boston Celtics and the Miami Heat are back again. Similar cores to the teams we saw in the bubble back in 2020. It's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. So Mo, I will defer to you first. The Heat made relatively light work of the Philadelphia 76ers in the second round. Obviously, Joel Embiid was playing through a concussion and missed games 1 and 2, and they had no chance of winning that series. So how are you feeling coming out of the second round here against the Sixers?
Well, of course, I have to feel nervous. Like my team that made the Eastern Conference Finals, and we're playing a team that I think matches up not only really well, but has the potential to outmatch the Miami Heat in the Boston Celtics, because I'm a big believer that stars win championships. I'm a big believer that stars kind of make the impact on these series. And I look at it and I'm looking at Jayson Tatum. Like, that's the guy that when I look at this series, I would expect for him to be the best player in this series. So when I'm looking at Miami, I need Jimmy Butler to keep it up. But as you've seen, like, when he had a superstar performance that had 40 and he scored 33, those resulted in losses against the Philadelphia 76ers. So it's kind of a confusing spot that the Miami Heat are in as far as what we need from Jimmy Butler essentially to win this series. So it's like we want Jimmy Butler to show us that superstar power that he potentially has and score 40 or score 35. But I'm looking at he needs to average about 25 to 27 to kind of get us in there. And I think we need to worry about our depth. I think that's where this series comes down to, because these are two of the deepest teams, not only left in the NBA, but just two of the deepest teams in the NBA, period. When you talk about impact, and we saw that with Grant Williams in Game 7 against Milwaukee, that you never know who's going to step up outside the stars. And so when I'm looking at this Miami-Boston series, I guess as opposed to looking at Jimmy or Bam Adebayo or the return of Kyle Lowry, I'm looking at Max Strus, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero. So those are kind of the guys I'm looking at in this series that are going to play the key to victory for us to ultimately win this series and continue on and have a chance at winning an NBA championship.
Juju, how are you feeling after Game 7's amazing victory for the Boston Celtics and the Grant Williams, Peyton Pritchard, Marcus Smart, Al Horford group of guys that gives Boston the same feel that Miami has of a deep team?
Not bad for the 5th best team in the Eastern Conference, huh, Kyle?
I said 7th originally. I backpedaled from 7th to 5th. You are correct.
I got to bring that today. You've been ragging me all season, and here we are, Eastern Conference. But, we've had this conversation in the past. This is nothing new for this group of guys. They've been to the Eastern Conference. I want to see them do something they haven't done before, make it to the NBA Finals. It's time for Jalen. It's time for Jayson. It's time for Al Horford and time for Marcus Smart to finally take that leap together. And huge offseason addition, getting Al Horford back in the mix, what he was able to do in that Game 4 victory against Giannis. Obviously, a lot of people remember the dunk and the mean mugging that was going on there. Al was a critical part to this team. You talked about the role players. The role players were amazing in Game 7. To have Grant Williams knocking down 7 3-pointers, looking like a Game 6 Klay Thompson out there, was a remarkable sight to see, especially because he started 0 for 4 from the 3-point line to start the game. And also, too, Jayson, even though it wasn't like a dominant performance, it wasn't anything close to the Game 6 that he had. He was 5 for 5 at one point from the 3-point line himself. So I don't expect the Celtics to knock down 21 of 55 3-point attempts. And in fact, I don't really want them shooting that many 3-point attempts, but they just kind of like went with what the Bucks gave them. They went with what the defense suggested they should do. I mean, if you're just going to give guys open threes, as long as those guys aren't Derek White or Daniel Theis, I'm okay with Grant Williams taking that shot. I'm okay with Jaylen Brown taking that shot. I'm okay with Jayson or Al Horford taking that shot. And that's what the Bucks did. Looking at Miami, I will say it, Mo, you mentioned some of the role players. That's going to be a difference maker for me because I think Miami has a way better bench than the Milwaukee Bucks did because Grayson Allen at one point was unplayable for the Bucks. Bobby Portis didn't give them quite the impact that they were hoping for aside from that offensive rebound in Game 5. And I think that this is a great matchup for NBA fans entirely. Obviously, you mentioned the history of these teams going at it a couple of years ago. Playoff Jimmy Butler always makes me a little uneasy, but as long as the bench of the Celtics, because they got that short rotation, shows up to play, I think that they are the favorites going into the series.
So Max Strus has been kind of filling the Duncan Robinson role for the Miami Heat. They moved Gabe Vincent into the starting lineup during the playoffs here. How do you feel about how Spo, and this is over to you, Mo, how do you feel about how Spoelstra's managed the rotation for the Miami Heat going into the playoffs this year?
Well, with not being an NBA head coach, I have to trust one of the greatest head coaches of all time. Essentially, he's been voted, one of the top 15 coaches of all time, which is an honor when you think about all the coaches that have come through the coaching carousel of the NBA throughout the NBA history. But you question it at first because we paid Duncan Robinson so much money, right? But when you look at Duncan Robinson has turned himself into a guy, we paid him what it costs to get a catch and shoot guy, a guy who could get hot at any night and determine the outcome of an NBA game, especially in the regular season. But Max Strus has been essentially the same guy who plays a little bit of defense and for a lot cheaper price, but you're not looking at the price tag when you're in the NBA playoffs. But you look at Duncan Robinson, it's like if he's not hitting 3-point shots, he's essentially useless out there on the court because he's not a defender. He doesn't really give you any other aspect. He's not a ball handler. So it's like if Duncan Robinson isn't hitting jump shots, he's useless on the court. And Max Strus has found a way to find himself to be useful, whether he's hitting jump shots or he's playing defense. And that's kind of the thing about the Miami Heat is that that's a team they've always been, especially the post-LeBron era, post-Dwayne Wade era, essentially. They're guys who they find these undrafted free agents or these unsought after free agents that nobody wants, or these guys who were injured and we bring them back because we find a way to plug them into the, like the Victor Oladipos, and then we get the Gabe Vincents and the Max Struses. And so I'm looking at Miami and it's like, I love what Max Strus has done. And we're picking up his player option. He's going to cost us $1.5 million next year for what he's done for the Miami Heat this year. $1.5 million to get that same production, if not hopefully elevate from next year. $1.5 million is a bargain. The only thing I look at Miami is like, regardless of the outcome of the Eastern Conference Finals, they may have some questions and some decisions to make as far as Duncan Robinson. With as much as they paid him, like they essentially could, and I've talked about this at length, they could have to trade Duncan Robinson for essentially nothing because of his price tag and because of the production they got from him. They might have to move on from him because they could look and be like, this is a bad contract, but you're not going to get a lot from Duncan Robinson. So I think regardless of the outcome of this series, Miami is going to go into the offseason and be like, we might have to give up Duncan Robinson, but it might cost us either bad contracts that we could shed off or just draft picks, and we give up Duncan Robinson for essentially nothing to shed off that bad contract that a lot of fans think that we signed with Duncan Robinson.
Send Duncan to Sacramento. I want Duncan to just come play for the Kings, just play 30 meaningless minutes every night.
At this point, send them to Sacramento. They could give us their 2 second-round picks for the next 2 years, and it'd be one of those, like, that's all it's going to cost to get Duncan Robinson, because it's like he showed that if he's not hitting jump shots, he doesn't have a lot of value for a team who's playing for a championship. So you're not going to get a lot for him, but you also, in return, you have Max Strus that you're going to pay $1.5 million. So I would be okay with that.
Juju, I'm throwing it over to you with the number one defense in the NBA since January 1st. They did a pretty good job of containing Giannis and just letting the Bucks shoot for a good portion of the series. And I know that's like hindsight 2020 because the Bucks were like 4 for 30 from the 3-point line in the last game of that series. So how do you feel the defensive matchup is going to work for the Boston Celtics in this series? Who's guarding Jimmy? Do they switch on Bam Adebayo? Because Bam hasn't been super aggressive shooting in the first couple games of the series. What do they do with PJ Tucker just sitting out there shooting corner threes? What's the game plan for Boston?
I think that they just need to play their style of basketball. And I know that's a kind of lame answer, but it's true. They do such a great job of switching on guys regardless of matchup, because even a guy like a smaller guard like Derek White or Marcus Smart is still able to match up on a guy like Giannis, on a guy like Kevin Durant. They don't get as focused up on the size mismatches. Hell, you see some of the smaller guys like Peyton Pritchard going on Brook Lopez, which is not necessarily something you want in a series, but that's the type of defense that the Celtics have been able to play. They don't care about assignment. They're going to give you the same level of effort on every play. The things that kind of concern me, and I just saw this in Celtics post game, Marcus Smart, he left that game in a walking boot. So that's something to kind of monitor heading into this Tuesday night game. And losing the defensive player of the year, that's going to critically impact your defense. And that's not to say still don't know the status of Robert Williams, who didn't play the last 3-4 games of the Milwaukee series. He didn't look great in the Milwaukee series. Obviously, he missed a month with that knee. Whenever Rob was in there, jumping around, high energy, blocking shots, that's what really helped the Celtics take off around January, Rob's development. And then he missed a month and he wasn't quite the same player coming into that Milwaukee series. So I am intrigued to see if he's healthy. And if he's healthy, is he going to be the old Rob Williams, the one that we saw in January, February, and March? And is Marcus healthy? Because if Marcus isn't there, then that kind of hurts you on the perimeter. Marcus is obviously arguably the best, and the NBA voters said so, the best perimeter defender in the NBA. Drew Holiday might have some exception with that, but either way, hey, Eastern Conference Finals, we got the win there. As far as those matchups, I remember the 2020 bubble season. I think a rookie, Tyler Hero, that was his rookie season, right, Mo? I'm not going crazy. That was Tyler Hero's rookie season. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Him going crazy in that series was a big part of the story. Jimmy averaged 27 against Philadelphia. Unlike the previous two series, they don't have one player that they want to exclusively focus their efforts on. Against the Nets, it was easy. Okay, we want to shut down Kevin Durant. We want to make Kevin Durant's life extremely hard. Against the Bucks, you know who you need to stop. It's that guy who was averaging 40 points in a 4-game stretch against you that put up just insane statistics. I mean, even in a 7-game series loss, I got to give that guy some love. Giannis was insane. Like we held him, but held kind of being a loose definition. Against them, you just have so many different variables, so many guys that can hurt you. Again, like the fact that they're, I believe, the number 1 3-point shooting team in the league tells you that they could burn you from the perimeter. So again, Marcus Smart being hurt, if he is hurt, that scares me going into this one.
Well, you mentioned Tyler Hero, so I'll swing that over to Mo as the next point here. Hero's shooting 23% from the 3-point line in the playoffs so far. That number was sent way down because I think he shot like 20% from the 3-point line against the Philadelphia 76ers. Obviously, Miami was able to overcompensate for that with the Jimmy Butler performances and Philadelphia's lack of offensive production. And Bam Adebayo has only taken like 9 shots per game during the Philadelphia series. So offensively, Miami's not at their best right now. It's not like it's like code red, like they're struggling, but at the same time, how do you feel about going up against the Boston defense?
This is such an evenly matched series. When you look at both teams if I was to talk about Boston's keys to victory, I would essentially turn it around and say the same thing for Miami, right? You're looking at Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. You're looking at Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo and probably Tyler Hero. So then you turn around and you're looking at Robert Williams. Like these two teams are so, like if you put them across from each other, they're so identical. The only thing that separates them is age. Jayson Tatum is in his 20s. Jimmy Butler's in his 30s. Jaylen Brown is in his 20s. Bam Adebayo is also in his 20s. But then you look at like Kyle Lowry's in his 30s, who he's supposed to come back. But Marcus Smart is in his 20s. Like these are such identical teams that this makes this matchup to look forward to so tough because it's going to come down to the Grant Williams game. It's going to come down to the Tyler Hero game. It's going to come down to, can Omer Yurtseven give us some quality minutes late in the game when he's got to step in for Bam Adebayo? And it's like, it's crazy to sound, but with being so evenly matched, like it's going to be when Ime Udoka goes in his bag and really tests how deep his team is, and Eric Spoelstra goes in his bag and he tests how deep his team is. That's what this series is going to come down to. And I think when teams are evenly matched, these games are won late in the first, leading into the second quarter and late in the third, leading into the fourth quarter, because that's when your bench comes in and that's where games can get separated. Is 3 to 4 minutes left in the first quarter, leading into 3 to 4 minutes into the second quarter, and vice versa with the third quarter. 3 to 4 minutes left in the third quarter, leading into 3 to 4 minutes. Those last 8 minutes are won by your superstars, but if your bench can do a good enough job in that 8-minute stretch, heading from end of first into the second, into third, into the fourth, I think this is where, in those coaching adjustments, I think this is where that game could be won. But I am looking at Tyler Hero. He ain't got to shoot 50% from the three-point line, but you got to do better than 23%. Like, you're supposed to be a shooter. You're supposed to be the guy that could create his own shot. We've seen it at times. We saw it against Boston 2 years ago in the bubble. Like, we saw how great of a series that was, but we saw that with what Tyler Hero can do. So we kind of need not necessarily consistent play like that from Tyler Hero, but we do need the flashes of, like, in the bubble and throughout the regular season with dealing with all the injuries that we've dealt with, Tyler Hero's consistent play. We do need that in that series, because that's what it's going to come down to. It's not your number one or your number two. It's going to come down for both teams from 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's how deep these teams are. You're going to be looking at 3 through 8 on one side and 3 through 8 on the other side. Whoever outperforms each other is going to win that game night in and night out. And so it's going to come through options 3 through 8 from every series. I think that's who comes down to end up winning this series.
Juju, talk about number one for the Boston Celtics, Jayson Tatum, because game 6, if Boston goes on a deep run this year, game 6 against the Bucks is going to be one of those games that we look back on as like a turning point of his career. So how do you feel about the performances of Jayson Tatum? He was very quiet in game 7, but he didn't need to be loud when Grant Williams was taking 17 3-pointers.
I think that Jason's main development this season isn't so much as a superstar, but as a playmaker. His ability to get the ball in the hands of his teammates. If he recognized that Grant was going off, okay, I'm going to swing the ball out to Grant for that corner 3. If it's a Jalen night, I'm going to make it a Jalen night. But if I need to be the guy, I'm going to be the guy. And that's what he did in game 6, because he knew he had to basically match Giannis step for step. And I do appreciate that he has that in his bag, but I appreciate more that he recognizes that he doesn't have to do that every single game, that he does have teammates that can pick him up. And that's going to be one of the big stories of this series. Who are going to be the role players that step up throughout? And if need be, Jayson, can he give you that 20-point game? Can he give you that 30-point game? And hell, can he give you that 40-point game? Because we obviously remember he had a miserable, and I mean miserable, game 3 just a series ago. Like, we were talking about him, is he going to be one of those guys that's always the bridesmaid, never the bride when it comes to the postseason? We recognize how good he is. We recognize how great he is, that next step, that two-way player. But at the same time, he can have a 9-point, 10-point dud like he did in game 3. And that game just reminds you, kind of like brings you back down to earth, that he is still a young player and he still has a ways to go. He's not just going to be unstoppable, unguardable every single night. And I think the Miami Heat matchup is going to give him tough shots, going to give him some tough looks. I think that where it's going to be a difference is, again, can he get the ball in the right places? Recognize if Al's having a good night, like a versatile big like Al, I think is going to be important in this series. What kind of strategy will Ime use? Will he go small? Will he go big? Going small was the turning point in this Milwaukee series when he started unveiling the lineup that featured Derek White and Marcus Smart, the 3-guard lineup. That was probably one of the biggest keys to victory in that Milwaukee series. So I am intrigued to see how that matchup plays. But if he's at least giving you 20 to 30 points a night, you're going to be fine with Jayson. You're going to be happy with Jayson. But I'd also like to see those assists anywhere between 5 and 10.
All right, Mo, I will defer to you first and foremost. Do you have any predictions, thoughts of how the series is going to go down? How are you feeling?
So now you put it in the bias cap. So I'm going to put my bias cap on, and I'm going to say the Heat in 7. I have to. And I expect Juju to say the same. You know, whether it's 6 or 7, I expect Juju to essentially say the same about his team. I'm going to say the Heat in 7. I think this is a hard fought battle. I think this takes you back to the early 2000s as far as the style of basketball that's played. I think there's 2 games where neither team scores 100 points. I mean, these are two of the best, literally the best defensive team that we've seen for 5 months at this point in the Boston Celtics, and in the playoffs, arguably the two best defensive teams that we've seen in the playoffs. So I'm going to say the Heat in 7. I literally think this takes us back to like the early to mid 2000s, the 90s style of play where everything comes down to defense, but it's modern day because we're not going to see those 70-point playoff games or 79-74, but it'll more be 99-94. I think this is going to be a great series. I think everybody's going to turn, regardless of who the winner is. I'm picking the Heat. Of course, I'm going to rock with my team, but I think everybody's going to turn away from this series and be like, this is what great basketball looks like. And from both sides, like I expect Boston to play amazing. I expect Miami to play amazing on both sides of the floor. So I'm going to like I said, I'm going to take the Heat in 7, but I literally think the casual fan will fall back in love with basketball because these two teams are literally the epitome of what guys our age have fell in love with while watching basketball growing up in the first place. Yeah, I'm going to take the Heat in 7, but this is going to be such a hard fought. I could almost see this being an instant classic series as a whole with a couple true instant classic games that we're having to rewatch the next day because that's how close, how tight it is, and that's how much I respect that Boston could have Miami's number.
Juju?
Well, this is the type of series that changes or makes narratives. If the Celtics win and Jayson Tatum could get to his first NBA Finals, then that lays the groundwork for him to be a top 5 player for the next 10 years. If the Heat advance, then this justifies their 2020 Finals appearance. This makes that 2020 Finals appearance look less like a bubble aberration and a legitimizing of their efforts in 2020 and including their efforts in 2022. This is going to be a hard-fought series. And one thing, gushing about my team a little bit here, I respect that they feared no team, they feared no superstar, and they feared no deer because they did not back down towards the end of the season like the Milwaukee Bucks to try and get themselves a cushier matchup. They said, okay, Brooklyn, fine, bring it, 4-game sweep, get out of here. Then they welcomed in the 2021 champion Milwaukee Bucks and said, this is going to be a hard-fought series. But other than one game, I don't think Milwaukee really had a great win in that series. They basically could have knocked them out at any point. You could have told me the Celtics could have won in 6. You could have told me the Celtics could have won in 5. Just a couple of mishaps at the free throw line were the reasons that it turned into a 7-game series. Now looking against the Miami Heat, and this is an opportunity for revenge for the Celtics. And revenge just tastes so good because you look at 2021, get eliminated by the Nets. You look at 2019, get eliminated by the Bucks. Who eliminated the Celtics in 2020? The Miami Heat. So this is an opportunity for redemption for the Celtics. First-year head coach Ime Udoka. A lot of turnover in the front office. Brad Stevens taking the reins as GM. As far as prediction, long story short, TLDR, I'm going to say Celtics in 7. Mo, you called it. You caught me. I got to go with my team, but I'm going to hedge on the fact that playoff Jimmy scares me. Playoff Jimmy does. I know I'm going to see a lot of those highlights of Bam's block on Jayson a couple years ago as well. I respect the Heat team. They didn't get the number 1 seed by accident. They're a well-coached, fundamental team, and this is going to be the closest matchup I think the Celtics will have had in the NBA playoffs.
Well, all right then. We've got Heat, we've got Celtics, and I guess we'll have to enjoy the series because I'm not going to make a prediction for this one. Anyway,
no, you cop out. Nope, you gotta do it.
We're mixed right now.
Let's go, Kyle.
Let me see. Where's a coin here? If it's heads, I'll go Heat. If it's tails, I'll go Celtics. Tails. I got tails. What did I say? Is that Celtics?
Yep, that's Celtics.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go Celtics in 7 then.
No, Kyle, stay picking the Heat. Stay picking the Heat.
Okay. So
my Celtics all postseason. Let's keep that narrative.
Yes, but I've already acknowledged that I was wrong about the Celtics. I've doubled down on Giannis and the Bucks. And
Changing your pick though, right? You can only be wrong twice.
Oh, but I was just wrong about the Celtics all season. I said that originally they were the 7th best team in the East, and then I said they were either 4 or 5. And if you wanted to argue between them and the Heat, I was willing to hear them out. And then they beat Brooklyn and they beat the Bucks without Chris Middleton, but they handled the series really well. Like, this series is so evenly matched, especially because of the Celtics offense being better than the middle of the road team that they were for most of the season. The fact that Tatum and Brown are able to generate shots on their own and because of that, the respect that Jayson Tatum being able to shoot from anywhere creates shots for Horford and Pritchard and Grant Williams and guys who are just sitting in the corner the same way the Heat do it with PJ Tucker and Strus and Gabe Vincent and all those guys. Like, it's a really efficient offense that Boston's starting to run. The problem is, like, eventually those guys aren't going to be able to shoot as well in every single game. Now they got big Grant Williams production, but they'll have a 4 for 20 game as a team at some point coming up in that series. So in that way, like, they're so evenly matched. And like you said, the teams are constructed very similarly, where you have a guy who can give you offense like Jayson Tatum and like Jimmy Butler, where they can go get you a basket to kill a run and slow things down for the other team. While Bam Adebayo against Al Horford is an interesting matchup, because you'd think Bam Adebayo could impose his will upon Al Horford, and yet Bam hasn't really been that offensive player. And when the Heat played the Celtics in 2020, it was like one game Bam had a 30-point triple-double, and one game Tyler Hero had 36 and 10, and that's how Miami ended up advancing. They could capture that magic again. It's just like the Heat were this great exception in all of NBA history in 2020, where you don't usually see a team win with like 4 different stars, each having a game mixed in between. So altogether, they're very similar teams, and I'm just going to call it a toss-up at that point. I know Vegas is favoring the Celtics, so like I trust Vegas is smarter than me in doing basketball analysis there, but I just think this one's a toss-up, man. I'm just really excited to watch it happen. And Boston, I guess, according to Vegas, is the better team, but I think both of those teams could win the series, especially because Miami's going to get 4 home games mixed in there. And man, it's going to be a really fun series. That's the best I can say there. I'm picking the Celtics, but that's just because the coin decided it. Like this game is a toss-up. This whole series is a toss-up.
It's literally that close, where it's like, if I wasn't a Heat fan, I would have did the same thing. I would have flipped the coin and been like, all right, I said heads Boston. Okay, go Boston. Like, they're literally going to do the toss up. They're going to do and they're going to look at each other and be like, we are so familiar. It almost doesn't make sense. Even from a coaching standpoint, there's not as great as Eric Spoelstra is. I think we're witnessing a great coach in Ime Udoka. Like, I don't think this is going to be an anomaly. I think he's going to continue to coach this team the way he's going to coach this team. I think they're going to continuously be constructed and build around Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown and move on. And obviously 5 years from now, all those players aren't going to be there, but Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown will be, Ime Udoka will be. And so when you look at it, you're like, it's literally like the Spider-Man meme where they're looking at each other in the mirror. Like, I literally think this is that. And that's why, even if the Celtics won in 6 or 7, because certain games could go away where either team was supposed to win and the other team won. This game is 6 or 7, I think, guaranteed, regardless of which way it goes. And I'll be okay with the outcome, because I think regardless of what team wins, I think we'll get an exciting NBA Finals matchup regardless.
I won't be. I might cry myself to sleep at night.
I'll be okay if Miami loses, but I will be rooting against Boston. But I'll just look at it like, as much as I love my team, I still love watching great basketball and knowing that I'll be able to witness Jayson Tatum in the NBA Finals and Jaylen Brown. I know that the next series of productivity will be great. So that's why I won't be fully upset, because as much as I love my team, I still love to watch the NBA Finals and genuinely enjoy it. And I know I'd be able to enjoy it watching Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown go to work against whether it's Phoenix or Dallas or Golden State.
As much as this series means to me, it definitely means a ton to the star, Jayson Tatum, because on JJ Riddick's podcast, he made it a point to say that if there's any year that burns in his mind the most, it's the bubble year where they had an opportunity to beat the Miami Heat and they failed to capitalize. So I think, as much as this pains me to this day, the fact that it pains the number 1 star on the Boston Celtics, who I think are the better team, I think that's why I am picking the Celtics to win in this series.
Yeah, things can change mid-series. There's all kinds of stuff that could get thrown up. And obviously in 2020, it was the Bam Adebayo block on Jayson Tatum. And in game 1 of Nets and Celtics, like, the Celtics winning game 1 changed the whole tune of the series. There are little things in between the series that can change all of that stuff. But anyways, Slumpbusters, hope you enjoyed this preview. I hope you enjoy all of the content that's going to come out of this amazing 2 weeks of basketball leading up to the finals. Make sure to give a like, make sure to give a follow. Mo, where can people find you as well for all of the work that you're doing and more content as the Heat go through the conference finals?
Yeah, you can follow me at Mo_Cheese15 on Twitter, at Up in Flames Pod on Instagram. And you can also subscribe to Up in Flames Pod on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Just make sure you type in Up in Flames. Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcast, you can listen to Up in Flames. So make sure you go tune into that. And I appreciate y'all for having me on.
All righty, y'all. Hope you have a great week, and talk to you again next time. From Juju Talk Sports and Kyle Ledbetter, we'll see you on the next one.